Okay, so thank you for joining us in the afternoon of day 4 for the Telltales Festival. And today, myself, Stuart Sims, and my colleagues Becky Holman and Simon Archer are going to be talking about using Efolios for assessment. And we're not necessarily going to be talking about best practice in terms of assessment design, but rather showcasing how it has been used. And then, so I'm going to start off talking through how we've used an eFolio on the Academic Professional Apprenticeship as an assessment. And then Becky's going to take us through some of the technical side of things, how you actually make an eFolio, how the Mahara eFolio system works that we have at the institution. And then Simon, who's pulling a sort of triple duty as someone who's used portfolios previously in his professional life as a pharmacist, who's also a student on the Academic Professional Apprenticeship, so is engaged with our eFolios, and is a lecturer at the university, so can give that perspective on how eFolios work. We've picked a few more people since I said it was a small group, but we're still relatively small. If you want to contribute in any way, do feel free to make some comments in the chat. I think as each of us are presenting, we might take it differently. I'm happy if anyone wants to make any comments, I'll pick them up as I'm going through, but it might be easier if where Becky's showing some of the technical things, if you wait until the end to flag up particular things, because typically when sessions I've been all week where more technical things are being shown, the answer is usually coming around the corner anyway. If that's all right for everyone, I will make a start. Because I've not thought this through, I'll have to stop sharing this PowerPoint slide and then reshare my Google Slides, which I'm using instead. But if you want to access the Google Slides, you can follow along at your pace. They're going to be going into the chat any minute now. There they are. And while I'm fumbling around with WebEx, one of the first things I want you to do is answer a Padlet. So I've also popped that link in the chat as well. And this is structured in 3 columns, asking what you think the strengths, weaknesses, and challenges of using a portfolio assessment will be. So if you can all start answering that while I flap around and share my other slides, that would be wonderful. So you see a few responses coming through on the Padlet. Useful for reflective practice. I'm glad that someone said that, because I'm going to talk about that quite a bit in the next few minutes. A range of materials, development and competency. Again, I think are important things that I'm going to talk about in how we use eFolios on the Academic Professional Apprenticeship. Weaknesses, students feeling constrained by the page format. I think that's something that we found a lot. Becky's nodding quite vigorously there, and maybe we can talk about that during her section.
Yeah, we did. We were talking about templates during my little bit.
And I think putting the cart before the horse slightly, we've had some mixed feedback on our course about the use of templates, and some people quite like it prescriptive. Some people want to go a bit more freeform, but we'll get to that later. Clunky platforms, hopefully that's something we can address shortly in Becky's part. And to plan in advance and build into modules. Yes, and that's something which I'm going to unpack as well. It's good to see there's lots of people having similar experiences. If anyone's been to any of my sessions throughout the week, they tend to be things I know a lot about, but eFolios I'm quite new to, which I thought I was happy to share my naivety and just how we've used them, not just myself, my colleague Joe Brindley, who designed a lot of the assessments on this course as well. We'll keep that ticking over throughout, and maybe we'll return to it at the end of my section, but I will hop back to my slides for now, and hopefully that Padlet's interesting for you. It's useful for me because it's showing that, as I say, my practice seems quite similar to what you've had so far. For anyone who's unfamiliar with portfolio assessments, I'm just going to move that window because it might be blocking it. I thought I'd dredge up this definition. It's quite an old one, which I intentionally selected because obviously this is a Telltale's blended learning festival, but while Becky's going to focus on the technology side, I want to just talk generally about using portfolio assessments as well, which are obviously not necessarily a new thing. This is from 1991. But I thought it's got a nice definition because it flags up some of the important things and some of the things that have been mentioned on the Padlet already, that they're about student participation in selecting content. So a good portfolio should have some choice, some freedom of how the students feed into it. It's not just something where we're very prescriptive about the content. There was some of the Padlet comments were saying that sometimes the format, or sometimes the software, or sometimes the template that we use in that software can be prescriptive for that. But they've also talked about the criteria for judging merit and evidence of self-reflection, which I'll go on to in a minute, in some of the challenges that I found in using Efolios for assessment, but also some of the opportunities that I think it provides. This slide, just drawing on some literature, though also most of it quite dated now, again, to show that, like, I want to focus more on the portfolio itself, and then we'll come to the technical bits. But like, the main reasons to do it, again, very similar to what we said on the Padlet, are a diversity assessment. Although I think what I like about what Lopez-Fernandez and Rodriguez-Illera have said here is an iterative approach. And I think that that's one of the things that a portfolio allows, which other kinds of assessments don't. Anyone who was in Amy Barlow's session about formative assessment yesterday, with the two-step exams, I think will be familiar with those arguments already, that portfolios do have a bit of an opportunity to feel like they straddle a formative and summative type of assessment, although that all depends on how you set it up. And I'll show some of the things which I think has worked well for us in using Efolios, but also some of the things which I think we could have done differently, and that students have said that they would have appreciated being done differently, which very much tie into that balancing, whether it's formative or whether it's summative assessment. Portfolios allow you to make linkages between related concepts, and I'll talk a little bit later about ideas of synoptic assessment and programmatic assessment, and how portfolios are a good way of drawing ideas maybe from diverse modules, which is something which can be problematic, the modularization of learning, particularly if students aren't seeing it as one whole course, they're just seeing the one assessment in front of each other. Efolios may be a thing which you can collaborate with colleagues to do, although that's not an easy option, but something that's worth bearing in mind. And very much in line with some of the comments we had on the Padlet, they're about development, but they're also about self-awareness of development. So portfolios are an effective way of encouraging self-reflection in students. So I mentioned that we use Efolios as an assessment on the Academic Professional Apprenticeship, which is a course which I teach on, which is a 2-year level 7 part-time course for all new academic staff. So if you're new to the university, you don't have a teaching background, you don't have a teaching qualification or membership of the HEA, fellowship of the HEA, then you will typically be enrolled onto the Academic Professional Apprenticeship. And it's a 2-year course, as I say, and we have one long and thin module per year. The first year is the Academic Professional Development module, and then the second year is the Research Informed Teaching module. I'm going to focus here on the assessments for the first year, because some of the second year ones are built on the first year ones. That felt to me like it would have been a bit confusing to drop you in halfway through. Where it is an apprenticeship, it's very much around professional development and relating the learning on our course, the off-the-job training on our course and the independent study, back to how new lecturers are developing into their practice, into their experience of being lecturers. So therefore, an Efolio or any portfolio is a good way of capturing this development, as we've discussed already, and we've seen some of the literature says, because it is iterative, it's developmental, it's personal, and it's self-reflective. It is worth saying, I'm aware, because this course is for new academic staff, that our students might have quite a different profile to some of the ones that you may have, although it is quite common to use portfolios on professional programs, and there's going to be some transferable lessons across from there. The important thing to notice that underpins some of the assessments when I show you them shortly is that our course is accredited by the Advanced HEs to award HEA fellowships. So the Efolio is one of the primary methods we check that accreditation, and that's something which could be worth bearing in mind for anyone who has a professional standards body who accredit their courses, because it's quite easy, as I think Becky's going to show you later, to demonstrate evidence of competencies and link things together in that way, which we use by asking students to map themselves to the UK Professional Standards Framework, which underpins HA fellowships. If any of you have associate or fellowship or senior or even principal fellowship in the audience, you'll be very familiar with the UK PSF, and assessments are intentionally structured around that framework. So the format of our eFolio is mainly text-based, but it's also, because it's experiential, we ask students to evidence their engagement with different facets of the university, their professional development, both in their discipline and more generically around pedagogy. For anything that's, will I be demonstrating how eFolios relate to the HEA? Yes, but briefly, but maybe I can dip into it more at the end once Becky and Simon have talked as well. So Catherine, please remind me if I don't cover that enough. About half of the assessments, and I'll list what they are on the next slide, they're reflective pieces. Simon says he's covering that, so great. They're reflective pieces, so written pieces of work, although some people embed multimedia things, and that's a possibility and an option in the eFolio system. We have a minimum word count on that, but obviously for module approval purposes and what have you, there's a maximum word count for the whole portfolio, and that's something that can be quite challenging to balance, because particularly when it comes to assessing them, whether some elements are pass-fail, whether some should have a grade. I'll get onto that in a few minutes. It is a pass-fail assessment. It has no percent, but it is a compulsory piece of work, so everybody has to do it. Although actually we're changing this balance this year because we've had feedback from course members that the amount of work that goes into some sections, particularly writing the reflective elements, the longer written pieces, they feel they're worthy of getting a mark, or at least some kind of more rich. Can't think of how you'd phrase it, because they're not after a grade, and what we might be doing is a traffic light system. So we might say that this is very good, or this meets expectations, or is below expectations. So it may still stay pass fail, but we're redeveloping this in advance of next year as we speak. But depending on how we fit with module amendment processes and what have you. It's worth saying this course starts in January, so it's not fitting with the usual academic year. There is scope for students to shape the focus of it, as a lot of the literature we looked at, and some of your comments were suggesting that we usually give a topic area rather than a specific boundary around it, though sometimes they're quite specific activities, and I think getting the balance right is important for feeling both prescriptive at times, particularly for getting people into using the portfolios, but then allowing some independence to let that personal development, the areas people are interested in talking about, come through. We have just one hand-in date at the end once people have finished the year, which I think has pros and cons, but we offer a sort of structured timetable throughout the year where we suggest you complete certain segments to go into your portfolio, although practice tells me, and we'll see if Simon wants to say about how he did his, that a lot of people save the big writing bits to the end and do them in one chunk, like you might an essay, even though they're often quite separate bits of assessment, and they do the more technical little bits or the exercises which are tied into something else as they're going through. I've already covered the UK PSFs. So that's a very text-heavy slide. Catherine, it's the Mahara platform, which Becky will be showing you in about 2 or 3 minutes time. So we'll walk you through how we set up eFolios. So you can see, if you have a quick read through that, there's about 4 reflective blogs, as we call them, but it's sort of more to capture the tone that they're reflective, but they're meant to be read by a more general audience, so they avoid technical jargon, but it's less important for what we're focusing on here. But there's also collecting of evidence that the course members have engaged in various activities. So a good example is a micro-teach. So one of our formative assessments is all course members have to plan a 10-minute mini teaching activity, which they do to their cohort and the teaching team, and get some quick developmental feedback on. But then there is a reflection associated with that activity, which is summative because it goes into the portfolio, but obviously doesn't gain a grade. So again, it's balancing and straddling that pass-fail, is it formative, is it summative category. And that is one of the challenges of using a portfolio like this, is that it's, if you have one hand-in date as we do, then it's a bit all or nothing in which you've engaged in the prior activities. And there's 3 or 4 of these activities which you have to do something out in the world beforehand, or maybe at home at the moment, and then write a reflection about it or fill out some activity. And most of the time that worked quite well, but there are always 1 or 2 people who, for sometimes for very good reasons, sometimes less so, weren't able to carry out the activities required to then evidence them in the portfolio. So you do need a lot of scaffolding and support to do that effectively. Part of how we scaffold it is, this is a screenshot of our Moodle page. It's a assessment book which takes you through every aspect of the Efolio, the kind of style of writing, kinds of style of engagement, any prior preparation that you need to do, and students can work through this at their leisure and return for each section. But there was a comment in the Padlet at the beginning about them taking a lot of time to mark, and that's true, but they also take a lot of time to prepare if you're using quite a wide diversity of assessments. You can see we've clumped together here about some of the reflections, but then there's 4 or 5 other elements which are quite distinct, so they need their own explanation and own templates, as Becky will talk about shortly. I've covered some of these points already. One thing that wasn't relevant for us but is worth considering in Efolios is group marking, particularly if you're trying to assess collaborative activities. One of the ways we got around that was, if it might be a collaborative activity, but you write a reflection individually about it to go into your portfolio, so you've got your perspective that's a bit different, but you're open to collaborate with colleagues, which I think a handful of people did, but then produced their own independent writing. I found it challenging to give developmental feedback on things that were quite fixed. I've given the example of the SWOT analysis here. We had 2 SWOT analyses, grammar incorrectly. One was about their general career development and what they thought they needed to do, and that was very straightforward to give feedback on, and quite a useful exercise for us to learn more about our course members. But the analysis about a specific teaching activity related to online learning, which was a bit more challenging, involved a lot of effort to understand what had happened, but also felt very contextual and not something you should necessarily be grading as such. So in some ways fit better with the pass-fail plans that we had in place, but could have involved a lot of work and can be a bit disengaging for the students to feel that they either have to put enough in. And that leads me on to my next point, that one of the biggest challenges we had is what counts as a threshold for a pass, if it's a pass-fail piece of work, particularly where there's lots of reflective elements, or you're demonstrating that you've engaged in certain activities. In principle, it should be enough if it is just there, but once we got to assessing these, there was quite a lot of diversity in the quality. Some people had perhaps gone too far and spent an awful lot of time on one individual component of the Efolio, which for them, you can imagine, was quite frustrating to just get a yes, that is present. Other people, they haven't quite met the competencies associated with the KPSF, and that was useful for us as a tool to be able to hold up and say, okay, it doesn't demonstrate these things, so therefore it has to be in the fail category. The most people, their portfolios were very up and down, and in terms of a fail, we did have a small number of them, you would have to just repeat the particular item that you failed on. I think I've talked enough about what we've done. I think you sort of capture the gist of that now. Just very quickly, I think that this is a useful tool for synoptic or programmatic assessments, so things that draw in assessments from various different modules, whether across the whole course or maybe just 1 or 2 that come perhaps at the end of a course, and for professional subjects. So it's just some definitions of synoptic assessment if you're unfamiliar with them. But the whole point of synoptic assessments is that they're integrative of different skills. They're demonstrating different things from across a whole range of experiences and knowledge and skills, and Efolios naturally lend themselves to that as well. And anyone who knows me well knows I wouldn't miss a chance to shoehorn in co-creation. There's a number of different ways that you can co-create with an Efolio, including trying to resolve some of those challenges which I said we've felt around weighting, which we're currently doing. We're talking to our students to plan for the future about what elements might carry a weight, which would get a grade, what the thresholds are for passing. and what they look like as well, giving examples of those sorts of things. But there's also, it may not be co-creation so much, but there's it facilitates independence, because the students can shape the content. If you have a very broad brief of what should go in there, that you're just demonstrating your own reflection, development, what have you, then it's encouraging that kind of independent learning, but also that diversity of experience. Right. Unless there's any questions I've missed in the chat, I think I will hand over to Becky now, who's going to address some of those questions by showing you what our platform for using portfolios looks like.
Yeah, let's do it. Okie doke, let me just share my web browser before I start. Okie doke. Can you see that okay, Stuart?
Yep.
Yep, all good?
Yep.
Cool. Right, okay, so just a little bit of background about how the Efolio system came to be first. So when I was employed as an online course developer, my first task was to find a suitable e-portfolio system that was within budget, but we could also lock submissions for assessment, because we'd use Google Sites, and obviously it's a brilliant tool, but it's not an e-portfolio tool. And if we were to have e-portfolios assessed within Google Sites, they couldn't be locked for submission. So at the time, we were already using Mahara as our e-portfolio system, but it was very much out of date. So I looked at the newer version at the time, and it turned out it fit all the criteria that it needed to. So we went with that, and we piloted it over the course of a year from October 2018, and it was a success. So there was a few little bits that needed tweaking here and there, but it was a success. So we piloted it with 2 degree apprenticeship courses, one of them being the academic professional course, and also some campus-based courses in science. So the eFolio system is now technically rolled out across the university, but it's not very well known at the moment, primarily because we do tend to use it mainly for degree apprenticeship courses, because DA courses have a need for an e-portfolio as part of their assessment for the majority of them. So I am going to show you through how the students access the portfolio and how we've set up templates for the students. I'm not actually going to show you how to create an e-portfolio today, because that's something that we would show the students and not the academics really. It's the online course developers' job to create the templates, and we have a discussion with the course team about what they need and what we need to put in there. But if anybody does want me to show them how a student or I would create a template and use the eFolio system in that way at a later date, I'm more than happy to have a one-to-one with you or a group session in how to show you how to do that later. Okie dokie, so we're currently in the academic professional development module, and the eFolio system is integrated with Moodle now. Before that, in the pilot, we would have to send students a link, but now all they have to do is click on the link within their Moodle page. So it's part of a block called connected systems. So we place the block on any module sites that are associated with the portfolio, so students can access it on any site that they need to. And all they need to do is click on the eFolio digital portfolio link, and it will log them straight into the eFolio system. So it'll log them as a student. There isn't any logging in they have to do. And then when they need to return to Moodle, they can simply click on this link here. So this is the eFolio dashboard. Essentially, this is a newer version of Mahara, but we have branded it with university branding and colours and all the rest of that. And what students see when they first enter is these 3 icons here. And these are the only things that they need to be able to see. So the first is the create icon. So if I was to click on this link, it would take me to the eFolio dashboard. So I'll just click on it here now. And it would take the student into all of the eFolio collections that they had created and any pages that they had created. So I might as well just point out here that Mahara has a bit of a terminology difference to what we use. We call an e-portfolio or an eFolio. Mahara calls it a collection. So students do have to get used to that difference in terminology, but they do so, super quickly. But it is, at the beginning, it does take a while to get used to. So here is where they would access their e-portfolios and pages. So they have single pages if they want to work on them in here, and then they can place them in the e-portfolio afterwards. So that's where all this editing happens. If I go back to the main page, they then have the share icon. So obviously they can then share their e-portfolio with their peers or with their members of the course team if they need to. But for degree apprenticeship students, we found that this is really useful for them to share their e-portfolio with their employers. So there's a facility called a secret URL, and they simply send that secret URL to their employer, and the employer can view their e-portfolio, see what they've been doing so far without having to log into the system. So we don't have to create a manual account for employers for the Efolio system, which is really useful and handy. And then lastly, they have the engage icon. So the engage icon is about finding other students on the course, which they don't really need to do, and joining groups. So what we have here is a list of groups that I've created. So I create a group for every module cohort so that we can place the template for their e-portfolio within that group. So I can see all of the groups that I've created here, but the module cohort can only see their own group. So when we click in here, this is the group, and we don't really use the groups for any other reason apart from housing their template in, because there's no reason for there to be any other kind of content within here. So if we scroll down, we can see collection shared with the group, and we've got the collection template. So during induction or whenever, at the beginning of the course or module, I will be having a demo, usually with the students, to show them how to use the e-portfolio. And we will have already completed the template and hosted it in the group here. So usually what we would do is get the students to copy the template at the same time with me so that we can kind of go through this together. So they have the template, they click on that, and then it brings up the e-portfolio that I or someone in the course team has created. So I created this template and I worked with Jo with exactly what she wanted, and it houses everything that the student needs. It's really nice and consistent, and every page, and here we have 11, is already pre-populated. So a student can click on any page and they are guided as to what they need to do. So this is for their reflective blog on entry for creating effective learning environments. They would have already had a discussion with Jo, and then they just have a text box here that advises them that they can start editing text. So the reason that we did the templates is because for the first cohort, for the pilot, we allowed students to have in total creative freedom. We said you can have as many pages as you like, you can format the portfolio however you like. It just has to fit the criteria of the assessment. As long as it fits the criteria of the assessment, then you're fine to submit. This didn't work out the way that we imagined it would. I think we thought that giving students creative freedom would allow them so much more flexibility, but actually what they really craved was structure. So by giving them this template, it gives them the consistency across the module for all of the students. So everyone has the same thing. Nobody's trying to kind of, nobody needs to see what other people are doing to gain ideas as to what to put in their portfolio. They've all got the same titles. We've already pre-populated the pages, so they know exactly what to be doing. And for the assessors, once they've seen one e-portfolio, they know what to expect for the remainder of the e-folios that they are marking. So it's consistent for everyone and a lot easier and supportive. So a student would simply click on the More Options icon and copy the template. That would take it into their own dashboard, as I showed you earlier, and they would rename it with their student number, and then they're good to go with editing the e-portfolio. And to edit any page, they would click on the edit icon, and this takes them into the formatting page. So it's really simple. We've already set up, as you know, all the text boxes that they need. They simply click on a cog icon, which is the editor, and it takes them to what is almost like an email editor, really. So they have the text here. They can see here that I've clicked start adding your text here, and then they can just go for it. They can add all the text. If we drop down here, they have all of their formatting tools. They have the ability to add links and pictures and, all the other kind of stuff that you would expect in an email editor. So they can add some text, and then once they've added all their text, they select save, and it updates, and that's it. There's no other saving that they have to do. Once they've saved it in that text box, it's done. It's really super simple. So we have a menu here that you might have noticed. This essentially allows everything, apart from a few minor things, that the text editor in the text box here that I've set up. These are essentially just like drag and drop boxes. So I could drag and drop a box in and they could put an image in. We could drag and drop the media box in and they could put a video in. We steer students away from this menu because it can become confusing because there's almost too many formatting options for them. They can put it all in the text box or they can drag and drop boxes here. We tend to say, ignore this menu because journals specifically, I will say, are not useful at all. Journals are a way that students can blog within their ePortfolio, but to make it more complicated, they host it outside of the ePortfolio. So students were starting blogs and then thinking that it was automatically in their ePortfolio, which, you know, they would, but actually they weren't. So they were actually outside of the ePortfolio that they needed to put in there themselves. And it was creating all kinds of problems. So I just say steer clear. Catherine asked if we can embed external tools into the ePortfolio. Yes, you can. So it's under media here. Nope, I'm wrong. Wrong one. It's under external here. And you can drag and drop in external media. So if you want to have RSS feeds, like Twitter feeds in your portfolio, you can. You just simply drag and drop this box in and then provide the link. External media, so YouTube videos, something from BBC, you can put in there. And if you happen to use digital badges, you can link up with your Mozilla backpack as well and add your badges here. So really, that's a whistle-stop tour of the ePortfolio and the templates. What I'm going to show you to end with is how students would submit. So now that we have Efolio integrated with Moodle, it's super easy. It's all it is a Moodle assignment, and I'll go to my student view now. Let's drag this over here. Okay, so I'm in my student account. I'm back on the same module page. And once it's time for them to submit their assessment, they would navigate to the typical Moodle assignment Dropbox. All your OCD will need to do to make it possible to submit an ePortfolio is to select Mahara in the settings. That's all it is. And that tells the Dropbox to not accept anything such as documents, PowerPoints, video, anything like that. It will only accept an ePortfolio. So when we click on the assignment, the student sees the typical submission table. And when they go to add a submission, because Moodle is now linked with Efolio, it brings up their ePortfolio collections that they have available. So they would first select the box to confirm that this submission is their own, and then they will select the ePortfolio that they would like to submit. And then they save, and then it's submitted, and it's as simple as that. If a student was to submit too early, or too early, and then they realise they've made a mistake, we can set in the settings to unlock eFolios manually, so that they can go back and edit and then resubmit before the deadline. Because once a student submits through Moodle assignment, they can no longer edit it in the ePortfolio system. They can view it and read through it and see if they've kind of made a mistake and done everything they should have done, but they won't be able to edit it any longer, which was the real requirement that we needed from an ePortfolio system. So that's essentially it from me. I'm just going to stop sharing. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up in the chat or let me know. Or if it is to do with showing you how to create the template itself and using all the different tools of the ePortfolio system, then I can certainly do that at a later date. But there's so much of it, it would take up an entire session itself at the moment, which is why I haven't shown you now. So yes, yeah, that's it.
Actually, Becky, there is one question that appeared in the chat, which I said that I was going to answer, and then I reread the question and actually realised it wasn't quite. I'm going to answer it in my way, but is there a built-in word count function into the Mahara? So could you turn on a word count? Because I was doing it. I'm going to talk about how to do it from a student perspective. But...
No, there isn't a built-in word count. We are actually updating the ePortfolio system in the next couple of weeks. So I will make a note to check through the new the updates to the ePortfolio system and see if that's something that's on their roadmap. If not, yeah, the only thing that we do at the moment is, as I showed you in the template, is we put in brackets that this is the suggested word count. I don't think the assessment itself, any of the pages have a hard word count. It's not the same as a, you know, an essay or an assignment. We just have a kind of bracket of what the student should be doing. I think it's also important to note that if students upload files to the ePortfolio system, they all only have 50 megabytes of space to upload. So that's why we say, you know, try and, if you're going to, if they need to upload specific files that might be quite space heavy, then we ask them to upload them in the Google Drive first and then share a link with the course member that they need to see the file. I also recommend students to do all of their typing in a Google Doc and then copy and paste it into the ePortfolio.
You're stealing my content.
Oh, okay, I'll stop.
I thought I'd just stop you quickly there.
Oh, but yeah, anyway, what do you recommend, Mahara? Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great if we could be using ePortfolio across the university a lot more. I think, as I said before, it's not really known about at the moment. We did the pilot. It worked for the courses that piloted it. It is kind of breaking out slightly, little by little, but it would be really nice to have it kind of used more, you know, across the university. So, yeah, I don't think that there would be any reason not to have it in other disciplines. And sorry, someone's asked if I run sessions for the students so they can use this. Yeah, so I will say that the ePortfolio system on first glance doesn't look like the most intuitive software. So I definitely give all students that are using it an induction session. And this time, due to COVID, I will be doing them online for the science biomedical students. But yeah, it's definitely, you need to go through this with students. And I tend to do it for induction, and then we tend to have one-to-one drop-in sessions throughout the remainder of the year or the module, because, you know, it's nice to be able to just give students a little bit of feedback on what they're doing, and also just to, you know, remind them of how to use the system, because we do provide help guidance as well in the form of Moodle books and videos, and I also just give them the Mahara guide to look at if they would like to. But I prefer to actually kind of sit with the students and say, okay, what bit are you struggling with? And let me just remind you of how we do this. And that works really well, and that's always really appreciated. Not sure. I think that's it, unless anyone else has any questions, or I don't know if I've missed any. But yeah, if you have any questions that you think of after the session, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to answer them or give you a demo. Okay.
Lovely. Well,
thanks.
I'm going to take over in that case. So I will go for a screen share as well. I think Becky will appear briefly on the video because she's the current one on my screen. So when that does appear, there we go. Okay, lovely. Okay, so if someone could let me know, there's building work being done just outside my office, bedroom / plant garden. So if that does kick in and start getting too loud for everyone, please let me know so I can close the windows. Hopefully it won't. So I'm going to talk to you kind of, as Stuart said, in a bit of a three-way approach. So essentially a triple threat. I'm going to be talking about as an academic myself, as a student of it, and then someone who's used it in the past. So background, I'm a pharmacist. Once you finish your pharmacy degree, you have to go into the world of practice, and you study under a pharmacist for 1 year. In that 1 year, you have to show a series of competencies, and that is done through either your tutor witnessing you doing it over a period of time, or by you writing up evidence or showing competency through witness statements from other people who have witnessed your behaviour or your skill set. So many years ago, when I had my pre-reg students, I was using a kind of a I created almost something along this line. So you can see on the screen currently, we've got my portfolio. So this is one step on from where Becky had looked at, where she was looking actually at the basic layout. I've gone into my portfolio. When you first go into portfolio, you're greeted with the evidence framework. And this is essentially a list of everything that you need to show within each year. So what you would be doing is you would be having your evidence, which details, you'd have a part of the mark scheme that you need to be showing off. And as you add evidence, you can build it in. And then you start to say, well, what part of the evidence does this match with? So thinking back to how I first used them back in the day, maybe along the top part here, one of the first things that we sign off a student normally on is they can communicate clearly in English. So we would have the first bit of evidence, be it tutor declaration, and you'd be marking that off. Next thing might be looking at actually maybe the ability for prescription assessment. So maybe not something that we would just say off the bat, yes, you can do this, or the students have been witnessed doing them. We've actually, they've provided us evidence. They've shown us how they've checked 500 prescriptions to make sure it's all okay. So they'll be collecting this evidence, they'll be writing it up as a statement. They may have gone on an external visit or placement where they've actually been under the supervision of the pharmacist. So they then used that pharmacist created an evidence, dog's barking, which doesn't help. So my train of thought. They've produced a witness statement. That was it. So that's the second part of evidence. So what we'd start to do is build up this actual collection of evidence. So maybe here where it says PEP cycle, imagine that is the prescription checking or the prescription assessment. So we've got maybe 5 bits of evidence here for it to show they've actually had that competency developing. You slowly build up that portfolio until you've come up with, I think my last pre-reg had about 120 pieces of evidence. The perk is the evidence doesn't cover just one thing. So you've got here actually, my micro teachers covers off 2 things. So you would have essentially this network of evidence build up. Now, obviously I said 120 pieces. There's a lot to cover off in that 1 year. These type of portfolios use a lot less information. You're consolidating 4 whole years of pharmacy education into a qualified pharmacist. So you would have a lot more things to be checking off on. But one good thing that allows for, which doesn't happen in this situation on the APA, was actually, because there was a mention in the Padlet about the a lot to mark. What I found really beneficial as the tutor was to actually look at competencies as you go through. So you might be doing a weekly, monthly, whatever cycle you decide on, going, right, let's look at your evidences. They're all fine, they're good, I'm happy with them, so we can mark that competence off. As you work through the portfolio, I was actually marking off those competencies, which might be something the student might want to think about going forward. I don't know. It all does very much depend on the student's motivation to keep their work up. That is the one thing that is big on it. But as my experience as a student using this, I can show you some of the evidence and how it is marked off. So we've got here, so if we look at one example, we've got the peers with enhancing practice reflection. So when we go into it, by clicking onto it, you go into it. So you can see this is using one of the templates that Becky was talking about. So I filled in some of my details along here. And now there was a question about the UK PSF framework. So whereabouts, what does it actually hit? Is that, how would you track that? So here is where I've said actually what things it actually applies to. So I've gone through and said yes or no. Then down the next bit, you then start annotating it to say, well, which part of the mark scheme for the actual APA. So I've got the mark scheme here as well, which is published beforehand. So I could see my type of things, what I need to be doing. And then that allows me to fill it in and then start actually annotating it for the correct thing. So once you've done all that bit, you then go back and it helps you track your progress. And that's what I found the most useful thing is that I could track my progress. Where was I? What was I doing? This contains both years here, so you can see where I'm working through. Now it copies down all the evidence, so it doesn't, that's not pointless evidence because the evidence is further along for the next year. But you can start to see how actually you can use evidence in multiple sessions as well. Becky did mention about the uploading of files, so that's one thing I found really useful. So things like when I went and had my APA review, so I've got my review documents in here as a PDF. So one thing that I've embedded into it, and then I was able to actually have my meetings, and I had my reflection involved as well, and my outcomes, and then my reflection by my tutor, and then I could annotate it for different elements as well. I'll just go back. And as Becky did say also as well about when she's talking about the badges part as well, so that's something I've been able to actually import in as well to say, look, these are the badges I've achieved on Moodle, which are core parts of completing certain things. So there's certain quizzes that we had to do or books on Moodle. So you can actually draw a lot of different things together to bring in to show your development over that year. And I'm just going to stop sharing, and I believe I've covered everything off that I needed to. I can't remember if there was another question. Word counts, that was it. So one thing I found really useful, personally, I wouldn't directly add the text into the actual portfolio. I would write it in Word. So I would normally write them in Word first, which allowed me to also to reference it properly, so I could actually have a separate bibliography at the end for any references. And then I could actually think to myself, well, what framework does this meet? I'd be putting that in the document, and then also think, well, what parts of the UK PSF does this meet? I put that in the document, and that would then allow me to do my word count to ensure that I was keeping on track. We were told there were recommended word counts, so it's very much, it wasn't a case of you've got to be 500 words or it's a 10% tolerance either way. It was based on an honour system. When it comes to students, there might be maybe more of a situation where you would want to be more militant on the word count. The only way around I could see if you wanted to check the word count would maybe be to copy, if you thought something was small, copy and paste it into Word, then to perform a word count, which understandably is a little bit of a faff. And that's the only way that I can really think about resolving it. So, don't know if there's any questions from my part that's popped up.
That I can see.
No.
To the few while you were talking.
Lovely. Yeah, because I think mine was just more about my experience with it, and just what I kind of think about it. Sorry, I kind of went a bit off tangent. I got a little bit distracted by the dog barking, which then just started barking again.
No.
Yeah, the partner swooped in and I think moved her downstairs into the lounge. So.
There are some things on the Padlet which I'd like to return to, which I think getting your thoughts as well would be interesting. So someone's made a comment that's challenging to not mark the media and need to concentrate on the content, which I think is something which we didn't really anticipate when we originally started using the Efolios, but it is easy to be a bit wowed by the ones where people have gone a bit above and beyond and made them all flashy. Obviously, I think we weren't wowed, and that's temporary. But I think you either have to build those things into a marking criteria. It has to be an aspect of it that you're demonstrating digital capabilities, which is relevant for our course. Or you need to communicate it effectively with students in advance of what the minimum expectations are that you can pass with text. And we did have some people who the formatting was problematic because they were just putting links to attachments rather than using the Efolio system. Any thoughts from either of you on that?
I didn't really venture into much media. The main things I used was PDFs, and I think a couple of images as well for when I was referencing different syllabus aspects. So thinking about how to try and show what I was talking about when I was talking about different curriculum design. It would have been interesting maybe to use some media into it if it would have worked with what I want to talk about. There was obviously the talk about someone from law was saying about showing the difference of advocacy, I think, and it would definitely work maybe in that way, but I think it is needing to host it externally to then input that into the actual portfolio to make it more enjoyable to mark, if anything, as well. I think because that creative diversity would really, I think, make it easier to mark if it's quite long portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, there were a lot of e-folios where instead of actually writing any text into the e-portfolio, people were just uploading PDF files of what they'd written, and that was what the assessor was meant to look at. And I really tried to steer students away from doing that at the time because it was the pilot. We couldn't really say you can't do that because we hadn't told them they couldn't do that. So the kind of, the horse had already bolted kind of thing. But I really tried to steer students away from doing that. And now we've kind of run that pilot and we know better what we should be doing. This is partly why we've set up the template. It's there for them to write in, as we said, write in Google Docs first, make sure that it's, correct and also saved as a backup. And then they can just copy and paste it into there. And if they want to upload media, that's fine, but it has to be, it has to be useful in the context of what it is that they're uploading, what page they're uploading to. So it's lovely to be able to upload pictures of, classroom situations that they've, been teaching at, or files that kind of supplement what they've written in the e-portfolio. That's totally fine. We do try and advise them not to go overboard with doing that or uploading files that they should really be writing in the e-portfolio system itself. And also they only have the 50 megabytes limit as well. Another reason.
Actually, let me just share my screen 1 second and I can show you an example, Becky, just what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Because for my teaching space reflection, so this was what my reflection was like on it. So I had those photos embedded into the reflection to then talk about what was obviously being seen. So then kind of the idea then went to my lesson plan and whatnot. But this, all of this stuff here just created in a Google Doc and then just copy and pasted in to make it a lot easier.
There's a question in the chat from Rebecca about eFolios on visually led courses. I don't know about here, Becky, but obviously, as Simon's just shown, you can embed a wide range of media, but I'm not sure if there's anything more technical that you had in mind, Rebecca.
Well, just to answer your question about that, Rebecca, eFolios are being used in architecture, but you might remember at the beginning of my bit where I said that we had looked at Google Sites. So obviously, no one size fits all, and that's the same for the eFolio system. So for some e-portfolios that are purely reflective and not to be assessed, some courses have gone down the Google Sites route, and architecture is one of them. So for the degree apprenticeship course in architecture, they're actually using Google Sites as their e-portfolio system. I haven't got any examples of it, but I can certainly see if there's a student that's willing to share their e-portfolio. They've only just really begun developing them, so there probably won't be any to show at the moment, but I can certainly put a note in my diary for in a couple of months' time and send you one if you would like, if I have permission from a student to do so. But we are actually, rolling out e-portfolios with Google Sites in architecture.
Any further questions? Coming up, I'm running out of time anyway, so perhaps we'll leave it there then.
Sorry, I'll shout then. I noticed in the Padlet that somebody has asked whether the e-portfolios can be marked by more than one marker. Well, yes, they can. We haven't actually tried it out yet because we haven't needed to, but because it's a Moodle assignment, the same practices follow for multiple markers. You can follow the same process that you normally would for a typical assessment. So don't take my word on it just yet because we haven't tested it out and I don't know how well it works with the eFolio integration, but there shouldn't be any differences with multiple markers for the e-portfolio using Moodle assignment.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Becky and Simon, for joining the session.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
There's more sessions coming up, but I've forgotten what they are. I'm sure they're fantastic. We'll see you there shortly.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.